Don't mind. Okay. Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to this evening session on the topic, what is the importance given to the earth or the environment in my religion? Our speaker for today is Dr. Mahesh Ashok Deokar. He is professor and head of the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies at the University of Pune. He is also chief editor of the Pune Indological Series, editor of the Studia Indo-Buddhica, and editor of the Studia Indo-Buddhica. He has a teaching experience of 27 years and guided many MPhil and PhD students. He has published and edited many books and articles in his field and won many awards. At present, he is a member of various committees of academic institutes. We thank you, sir, for graciously accepting our invitation to speak on our topic from the Buddhist perspective. After the talk, there will be time for clarifications and questions. Over to you, Dr. Deokar.
Thank you very much, Father De Cruz. It is my proud privilege to be a part of this lecture series. Let me start by paying my homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. The topic for this year's lecture series is, as we have seen, what my religion thinks about the issue of environment and nature care. And in this series, I'm here today to present the view of Buddhism and also the practice which we see in the scriptures and also sometime on ground. So let me start the talk by thanking the organizers for this wonderful initiative of having this kind of interfaith dialogue, or you can say that we are just trying to understand each other and each other's religious position about the topic. So in Buddhism, I mean, if you look at the way Buddhism interacted with the nature, and the way it has kind of understood environment and has related itself with it, I think that is something which is really worth understanding and also worth knowing. You see, I mean, if you just look at Buddha's own life, I mean, it started under a tree in the famous grove of Lumbini, currently in Nepal. He attained his enlightenment. He became the Buddha. He got the knowledge which after which he was seeking. That also happened in Bodh Gaya under a tree, and this time it was a people tree, or in Buddhism we call it a Bodhi tree. And his journey ended in Kusinara, present-day Kushinagar, in Uttar Pradesh, also in the presence of trees. So there were two twin Shala trees, it is said, and between these two trees he breathed his last. So we can say that his whole journey, started with nature, reached its climax in the company of nature, and also ended in the company of nature. So nature was a part and parcel of Buddha's whole life. His whole journey as a wandering ascetic was spent mostly in forests or in places close to forest. Uh, so we can see this, that this connection with nature is something which is continuous and which is a close and very natural kind of a relationship. As you all know, that Buddhism is it's a Shramanic tradition. It's a tradition of wandering ascetics, and as a result, it never stayed in cities or villages in houses, but it rather, the monks and nuns were rather supposed to spend their lives in forests, or just plainly speaking, away from the hustles and bustles of the city or the village life. So one can see that they are naturally bound to the nature, yeah? To forests and mountains and so on. And in order to do their practice, what they wanted is the solitude. They required solitude, and that solitude they could get only when they were in the nature, right? So uh, nature again played a vital role in the whole Buddhist practice, and monks always kind of spend time alone, in loneliness, in solitude, in forests, did their meditation, and they only met occasionally to share their ideas, to follow certain monastic duties, and so on. I mean, this is a this was a situation in early days of Buddhism. So it was quite close to nature. We have wonderful, uh, accounts of monks and nuns in texts like Theragatha and Therigatha, who talk about their closeness with the nature, and how nature helped them to cultivate uh, the qualities necessary for a meditator, and how could they do this whole exercise of cleansing their minds, achieving the concentration in the vicinity of the nature. So nature played a vital role in Buddhist practice, right? And of course, the things later on changed when the religion took a monastic form. The monasteries were built, and the permanent kind of later on they also turned into permanent settlements. But there too, these were kind of specifically, the care was taken to make them nature friendly, close to nature. So the monastery is surrounded by trees, and they are mostly located outside the city or outside the village boundaries, and close to mountains and so on. And we are in Maharashtra. We know that we have several rock-cut shelters, which we call leni, and these are outside the city, outside the villages, on the mountain tops, mostly. And these are wonderful places which are secluded and which are close to nature. And even today, one can actually experience that. So the connection with nature in Buddhism was kind of, in a way, uh, natural, and the relationship therefore with nature of Buddhist community of monks and nuns was also very much symbiotic. So they were close to each other, and therefore one of the in one of the famous stanza, it is said, Ramaniyani Aranyani Tattame Ramati Mano. So the forests are beautiful, charming, and my mind, dwells there, and it enjoys the forest. When you look at Buddhist literature, it is full of imagery from nature. There are often references to imagery, which is related very much to nature. So the very first thing, very popular image is that of a lotus, and the Buddha kind of looks at, is often compared with a lotus, which rises above the muddy, dirty water and represents purity and detachment. Similarly, it is also interesting that the word like forest, vana, also is used to represent the density of human cravings and desires. So the very word for craving in Buddhism, in Pali language, is vanatha. So basically, it's a forest. It's a dense forest because it is something which where one cannot really, uh, see through, and as our desires are very dense, so these forests are also quite dense. Just give me a minute. I'll have to open the door. I'm sorry. Just a minute. ओवर लगा है ठीक I'm so sorry, but yeah. So so one can see that all these images, for positive as well as negative things, we see several imagery coming from, lots of imagery coming from the nature. In texts like Milinda Paya, the questions of King Milinda, uh, a, a Buddhist practitioner is asked to gather qualities or learn qualities from animals, from birds, from trees, and so on. So uh, one can see that actually, uh, not only that this imagery was quite frequent and popular in Buddhist literature, as it was intelligible for the audiences, and at the same time, it also reflects very close observation of nature by Buddhist practitioners. And when they use this imagery, of course, many of it, many of the things were quite well known, but there are also many new things, which new contexts in which they use the imagery. For example, in a text called Sutta Nipata, we see a very famous imagery of a rhino, this one-horned rhino, representing a lonely, solitary Buddha or a practitioner. So, these imageries of animals, trees, uh, flowers, they show a very close connection and a very close understanding of nature on part of Buddhist practitioners. Now, let us turn to more philosophical or ideological issues. Um, you see, unlike other traditions, Buddhism does not really consider that nature or things in the nature are made for human beings, right? So that kind of attitude and approach is not seen in Buddhism. So Buddhism considers um, the nature as a part of mm, our living, and when it divides, for example, sentient beings belonging to different realms, it considers that they are part of this universe. In Buddhist cosmology, we talk about 5 or 6 gatis or realms of existence, and these 5 or 6 realms, They include divine beings, they include human world, and they also include the world of animals, demons, and ghosts, and even the hellish beings. So what is interesting is that the animals and so these are realms, different realms, where one goes after one's death according to one's um, karmic what do you say, uh, karmic accumulation. So the point is that human being is not at the center of the whole universe, but it is a part of the universe. And as human, there is a human world, but we also have other worlds uh, where we have beings of different types and different capacities and different abilities. So the whole point, one point is, the whole important point is that human being is not a master or a user or exploiter of all the nature or the environment, but he is a part of it. Just as there is a human realm, there is also an animal realm. And of course, in this realm, we don't have vegetation. Now we'll look at it, how vegetation is looked at in Buddhism. So definitely, in Buddhism, we see this awareness that just as human beings have consciousness, they have capacity to think and will. Similarly, animals also have capacity to think and will. And we are, very much aware, or this is quite well known. We have many Jataka stories, Jataka tales, where we see that the Buddha appears in the form of some animal in one of his birds, and then as an animal he performs several acts, good acts. There are also animals performing evil acts. So on one hand we can see that okay, this is a kind of a personification of animal, but at the same time we can also look at it as acknowledgement of the fact that animals can also think and have a capacity to do what we call in normal terms as karma, the morally loaded actions, right? So that kind of attitude one can see, about the animals. And otherwise too, you can see several references where animals are considered as beings having volition, having will. They have chetana, right? And therefore, in Buddhism, one has to kind of keep this in mind that when we are talking about living creatures, we talk about basically creatures having volition, or in a more technical language, we call it chetana, the capacity to will. So that's volition. So from that point of view, when you look at vegetation, when you look at trees or plants, what Buddhism thinks is that okay, these are living things, but they are not, so to say, they do not have chetana, so they are not uh, they are not even in a way called sattvas. Rather, taking the Jaina position, these are the beings having only one faculty, so they do not have the capacity to think. And this is very important fact when we will look at the Buddhist ethics regarding nature, especially regarding animals or plants, right? So in case of animals too, of course, there will be a distinction between between like large animals or animals with very clear sense of volition, or on one hand, and then on the other hand we have insects, or what we can call in modern terms like bacteria, amoeba, all these creatures. They do not have kind of uh, a strong aspect of chetana, the volition, right? So they are treated differently in a way. uh, I said that of course, in this presentation of Buddhist cosmology, I have told you that there are 5 or 6 gatis which are thought of. Now, there too, one thing is quite evident. Even though I said that, okay, it has a very, it does not really think that the whole world is made for human beings, the nature is made for human beings. But still one can see that there is some kind of hierarchy which is implied. So one can see that maybe animals could be are lower than human beings, though they are higher than the ghosts or the hellish beings. So they are higher than that, but they are lower to human world. So there is some sort of hierarchy. So you can see that uh, the human life in a way is more precious as compared to the animal life, or one can say that animal kingdom has, the way it is put it, has less chances of attaining spiritual progress as compared to human world, and as in terms of consciousness, and so human consciousness is at a superior level as compared to the animal consciousness. So we can see some kind of hierarchy there. So it is not the case that all, humans and animals are at the same level. Of course, in modern times, some of the people, who are animal lovers would not probably like this idea. But this is what it is. In the traditional Buddhism, we see that there is some kind of hierarchy there, right? And as I said, even though vegetation or plants, even though they are considered to be something living, but they don't have chetana, so they are not sachetana in that sense. They are not considered to be sachetana beings. But trees and plants, trees especially, are considered to be the abodes of spirits. So in Buddhist literature, we get references to ideas such as one Vruksha Devata. So it's basically a Devata residing on a particular tree. So the trees, they serve as abodes, or for deities, for certain beings. They also provide shelter. So we have all sorts of, um, there is a reverence for trees, but they are not in a way considered as so to say sachetana uh, beings, like beings with volitional beings. So that's that difference one has to kind of acknowledge. Now, when we come to Buddhist discipline, specifically the discipline for lay people and discipline for the monastic community, what we see is, of course, the very first rule, the very first precept. In Buddhism, there are, for lay people, there are 5 precepts, and for monk community, or for the community of monastics, there are 10 precepts. And for both, the very first precept, the very fundamental precept, is abstinence from killing, right? So, and when the word killing is used, it is not killing of human beings, but the expression is very general. It says pranatipat. That means taking life. Now, it could be taking life of human beings or taking life of animals, but any sort of taking life. And that is something like the first precept. So one should abstain from taking life of living beings, living creatures. Now, to a great extent, this is not just limited to, as I said, to human beings, but also extended to all sentient beings. So the first duty, whether you are a monastic or a layperson, is to save life and to protect life, right? Protect life, and take a vow that you will not kill. You will abstain from killing. So that's the very first vow. So that forms a very important and integral part of Buddhist ethics, Buddhist practice, that you abstain from killing. So that's something which is very important. And then that becomes, that also in a way defines your relation to environment, especially to the living creatures. And interestingly, also, as a practice, as a Buddhist practice, especially in the Mahayana tradition, you will see that the vow of someone who is aspiring to become a Buddha himself, aspiring to Buddhahood, is to help all sentient beings to reach enlightenment. And again, the term which is used is sattvas, not human beings, but sattva. And sattva is a more general term, and it includes everything which exists, everything which is living. So it is a responsibility of a Buddhist practitioner to help all sentient beings, no matter whether they're human beings or animals or insects. I mean, it's a responsibility to help everyone to reach enlightenment. Now, that's a goal. That's a fundamental principle which is given to Buddhist practitioners. So, in both these things, I mean, as a precept, uh, negative precept, abstinence from killing, um, we can see that one is asked not to involve in any sort of violence. And as a second principle, as a positive principle, one is expected to help all sentient beings to attain enlightenment, to become Buddhas themselves. So it is a vow which in a way asks a practitioner, a Buddhist practitioner, to treat all sentient beings as potential Buddhas. So when you say that they are all sentient beings are potential Buddhas, and one is expected as a practitioner to help them to reach or to realize that full potential, right? So that is an idea. So uh, this is something. Now, even though I said that, I mean, there is a hierarchy in terms of living beings. I mean, in terms of their consciousness and volition. But as a principle, as a fundamental principle, it is accepted that all sentient beings have the potential to become the Buddha. I mean, that's their full capacity to realize their full capacity as human being. Like Buddhahood ultimately is a ultimate capacity of human of any being, any sentient being, and therefore they're all capable of Buddhahood. So that's idea which is very important again in order to see the Buddhist perspective on environment and nature, especially living world. Now, let us look at some of the other principles or rules in a monastic setup. Now, it is interesting. I mean, now this is something which is recorded in the book of discipline in the Buddhist tradition. Monks and nuns are not supposed to travel during the rainy season. That is, and they are supposed to stay in their respective monasteries. Now, this rule, when it was first established, I mean, it is said that earlier, even the Buddhist monks and nuns used to travel during the rainy season, but then there was kind of a criticism from other communities and even for common people, because they were by that time they were used to the Jaina style, I mean, practice of 4-month retreat, the rainy day retreat, in order to avoid any sorts of violence to the new vegetation. Now, the Buddha later on accepted this for his own Sangha and made a rule that the monastics should not travel during the rainy seasons. And the main idea was, of course, not to hurt or harm any vegetation during that period. Now, one can say that this is something which was prompted by, let's say, forces from other religious traditions or forces from public opinion. Maybe, but I mean, once that was felt, I mean, the Buddha accepted that and made it a rule. Similarly, I mean, there are strict rules regarding in a monastic, I mean, in the book of discipline regarding like not, I mean, throwing away food in the water, the drinking water, keeping the sources of drinking water clean, not to urinate, not to defecate in the water, and so on. So, I mean, we can see that there are rules which are taking care not just of cleanliness, but also of the life which might be there in the water. So it is something like a precautionary act of not harming living beings there. Uh, Similarly, I mean, you also have uh, certain conditions when one is digging or preparing land for construction and so on. So, I mean, all these rules are there. Now, in terms of non-violence, Buddhism is not as strict as Jainism, and it kind of adopts a more moderate way in this regard. So what it values is basically will not to kill. So, and it does not really ask one to be, the non-violence to an extreme. So there is a story where one blind monk um, was accused of killing insects while taking his walks. And when this was reported to Buddha, that such and such man, I mean, he's an arhat, he's a he's an enlightened, he's a person who has achieved the highest goal of Buddhist life. But at the same time, but still he's killing insects when he takes walk. Now, the Buddha at that time said that he cannot be considered as guilty of killing because he is not doing this intentionally. So this is not an intentional act. So what Buddhism values is that you don't have intention, no, you don't have will to kill, and then accidentally, if you happen to cause some violence, that is forgivable. That's one thing. Second thing is, like, at some points, we also see that, as Dr. Ambedkar puts it, I mean, Buddhism does not go to the extreme, and it's that you do not follow non-violence as a kind of as a strict rule of adherence, but it's a guiding rule. So you, as far as possible, especially householders, are asked to be non-violent. But if there is a need, one can actually resort to kind of also violence or even killing to a limited extent. I mean, we see such things. I mean, for example, now there could be issues when it comes to environment ethics, like to making use of pesticide, or especially these days, I mean, when we have development projects, how about harming environment for that purpose and things like that. So I mean, or recently, very recently, we saw certain things like when there were pandemics, uh, several birds and animals were killed. I mean, just to kind of avoid the spread of disease. So, I mean, in such cases where we have like ethical issues, basically we can see that this is something which is, I mean, the guidelines from Buddhist side. Okay, so this was about the monastic rules and principles concerning environment and nature. Now, let us come to some of the fundamental Buddhist principles. Um, Buddhism talks about its very fundamental principle is that of pratitya samutpada, or interdependent co-arising or coexistence. Now, Buddhism acknowledges that anything which arises, it arises due to causes and conditions, and for every effect to come about, there is not just single cause, but there is a series of conditions, causes and conditions, that is responsible for the arising of that particular thing or a particular event or incident. Now, this doctrine is very important because it highlights the interdependent nature of our existence, interdependent existence. Now, this interdependent existence is at the core of any sort of environmental care or nature care, because it is important for us to understand that the world is not, the nature or the environment is not made for you to exploit, but you are a part and parcel of that whole environment. You are one of those many components of that nature, of that environment. So whatever effects we are experiencing now at this moment, they are conditioned by um, several causes and factors. So our current existence is not in isolation. It is dependent not just on human beings or the around you, but it is also dependent on the nature around you. The and this is something which one has to really take into consideration. So in order to have a peaceful living, a peaceful life, one has to have all the favorable conditions. And among those favorable conditions, we cannot ignore nature. I mean, recently we have seen these incidences, what happened in Kerala, what happened in Himachal Pradesh, for example. I mean, human beings, when they do not understand their interdependence on the nature, and end up doing excessive cutting of trees, deforestation, and excessive exploitation of natural resources. When we build dams, for example, we destroy the whole biosystem and so on. So I mean, all these things, when we do this, our single act, or not just act, even our single thought can affect the whole world in one way or the other. So every small act matters. Every thought, every volition matters. So if you have a positive and a volition leading to a positive act, it will of course have positive impacts. But when you have negative volitions, negative thoughts leading to negative actions, it is going to harm, and it is not just going to harm oneself, but it is going to harm the entire community, society, and even country. So when Buddhism talks about this particular principle of dependent co-arising, I mean interdependence of uh, things, it acknowledges that if I mean, and that is something, I mean, initially I talked to you about this nature and how the nature was found so favorable for the practitioners, the Buddhist practitioners. Now this is what I mean. Nature was one of the condition. In that condition of solitude, the condition of peace, serenity, which helped monks and nuns to achieve their mental cultivation. So you can see nature worked as one of the conditions. Now, same thing if we keep in mind, then it is quite clear that in order to have better world, we need to acknowledge our interdependence on the nature, on our environment, and therefore, if we want to have a good life, we'll have to take care. We must take care of the nature. We must take care of the environment. We cannot ignore it. We cannot exploit it, right? So if we exploit the power of nature, we can see it's still so great. So I mean, it has such a power that I mean, the human power is nothing before that. So one has to kind of keep this in mind. That's one thing. Now, the second thing is, which is also, I mean, another important thing is, like when we go now, let's turn to Buddhist practice. Now, when we talk about Buddhist practice, we talk about, like, we learn in the Buddhism that craving is a cause of suffering. That's a premise which was given by the Buddha. So all our suffering, they are rooted in craving and ignorance. Now, when you say craving and ignorance is defined as uh, having no understanding of this interdependent nature of reality. So when we do not understand this, when we do not consider this interdependent nature of our existence, so that is our ignorance, and that ignorance is responsible for our suffering. Now, we have already seen this in all the natural calamities which we have experienced in recent times, may it be floods, may it be landslides, not the excessive. I mean, we are creating lots of roads, infrastructure without like taking care of the nature, without ignoring the nature, and then as a result, we are suffering, right? And this suffering is due to our ignorance. Second reason for our suffering is, of course, the craving. Now, the craving, again, I mean, the Buddhist principle of craving. Now, the craving is not just a craving of one person. It's not just an individual craving which is responsible for individual suffering, but sometimes that craving takes such a heinous form, that craving of one person, craving of a group of people, or craving of a country, that harms the entire world, right? Now, this craving is responsible for great environment hazards. So may it be the craving of industrialists creating, I mean, harmful substances, gases, so on, or may it be craving a person, of an industrialist who want to kind of do all the deforestation and so on, just for gaining some kind of great profits and land acquisitions and so on. I mean, we see what is happening in the coal mining areas, for example. I mean, this whole tribal land was destroyed just to have coal mines, and why is that? Because we want to have, I mean, the industrialists, of course, want to have more money, and we as consumers want to have more and more energy to have our comfortable lives. So I mean, now one has to adopt moderation. One has to adopt moderation. I mean, the craving. I mean, the Buddha is not saying that we should have no desires. I mean, there should not be any wishes. I mean, one can have wishes, but I mean, when these wishes turn into cravings, when we are obsessed with those wishes and desires, I mean, then that becomes a cause of suffering. And this is what also happens in the field of environment hazards. So one has to be again careful of this individual, communal, and even the national desires. I mean, we have seen, I mean, the impact of the national desires when continents of Africa and Asia were literally robbed, and even, I mean, the environments of these countries were actually, we can say, almost uh, exploited to such an extent that we are not left with, I mean, these countries, I mean, have to suffer great losses. So one has to really take care of that. Now, in terms of environmental care, I mean, and nature care, I mean, my last point is like what is necessary from Buddhist perspective. I mean, there is something which is inherent in Buddhist practice. One is the practice of Brahma Viharas, the sublime abodes, as it is translated usually. And this is like cultivating qualities of friendliness, compassion, um, altruistic joy, and equanimity. Now, these are basically taught as practices to develop friendliness among living beings, among human beings. So basically, this is mainly done with sentient beings. So we develop friendliness towards all sentient beings. What it means is that we always wish for their welfare, their well-being, their happiness and joy. We develop similarly the attitude of compassion to all sentient beings, thinking that okay, they should not have suffering, and if they are suffering, they should be out of that suffering. So to have this kind of volitions and to strive for making the life of others, I mean, to have that attitude to relieve all sentient beings of their suffering, I mean, that's the compassion attitude. And the mudita, altruistic joy, is basically rejoicing in the well-being or the welfare or the progress of others, success of others. That is altruistic joy, mudita. And then equanimity, basically to treat all sentient beings with equanimity, equanimously, without fear and favor, right? So to develop this kind of attitudes. Now, this is what is taught the practice of Brahma Vihara. Now, I think what is said in this practice, which is applicable to all sentient beings, may also be applicable to the nature as a whole. I mean, not just sentient beings, but to the natural resources, for example. Are we really friendly to our natural resources? Do we really take care of them? Do we really want our rivers to be clean and healthy and peaceful? Do we really want to have our forests, I mean, clean and without any environmental hazard? Are we really compassionate to all our mountains which are being, cut and carved, or our earth, Mother Earth, which is being, mined to such an extensive, such an extensive scale? So, are we really compassionate to our nature? I mean, we should really ask this question to ourselves. And do we really cherish the the growing of forests? I mean, the nurturing of nature. Do we really cherish that? I mean, do we have that kind of mudita, right? So one has to develop these kind of attitudes of friendliness and compassion, not just to sentient beings, but also to nature, like to our environment, to air, water, right, earth. So we need to have that kind of attitude towards all this. So that is one way. And second way, which is the part which is shown by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is the attitude of universal responsibility. In Buddhism, especially in the Mahayana Buddhism, we have this uh, the ideal of Bodhisattva, a person who strives for enlightenment. Now, in his case, his responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, is to help all sentient beings to attain enlightenment, to become enlightened beings. And as a practitioner, he is supposed to take the responsibility of entire world, the whole universe, not just this earth, not just your own country, not just your own village, but you have to take responsibility for the entire world. I mean, you are responsible as a practitioner for the enlightenment of the entire world, the universe, and therefore now, I mean, you have this universal responsibility. You cannot say that, okay, others will do it, government will do it, or some organizations will do it, NGOs will do it. You cannot really have that kind of attitude, but your attitude to this kind of questions of nature conservation and environmental conservation, should that be of a bodhisattva, that you have the responsibility, you're part of this world, you are interconnected with this world, and therefore you are responsible for this world, it's for its well-being. And that will happen with your single and small act. So one small act, as I said, one small thought, since you are connected with the entire world, will affect the world around you. So that's the attitude, and that is something which we are expected to practice as a Buddhist. So this is something which I think which would be our takeaway, that from a Buddhist perspective, I mean, one thing is like the nature is not for you to enjoy and exploit, but you are part and parcel of this nature. As a result, you have a responsibility to work for its betterment, and not to let it deteriorate or harm. And you have a responsibility for yourself and for others. So with this attitude, I think one can foster the idea of environmental care and the nature care. So I think I will stop here. And if there are any comments or questions, I think we can then take them in a course of discussion. So thank you very much. I once again thank Father De Cruz and this entire team, I mean, for taking this initiative. I mean, he has started this lecture series for, I think, quite a few years now, and it's a very good idea to bring I mean, thinkers of different religious traditions, and to find out a way which will help us to have a more peaceful and harmonious living. So, Father, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Deokar, for this lovely exposition, very clear. And invite anyone would like to ask any clarification or question. The space is open to everyone now. Please ask your questions.
You have to unmute yourself while asking the questions. Mr. John, your voice is not audible.
Please announce your name and ask. That'll be good. Good person ask.
Sir, one question regarding
Yes.
Sri Buddha. Lot of association he got attainment, knowledge sitting under the tree, and
Yes.
association with the tree is many places. While meditating, he sits under the tree and meditate. there is a connection between his life and tree.
Yes.
Can you elaborate anything on that particular matter?
Yeah. In fact, I started my talk with that. So, I mean, as I said, the Buddha was born under a shala tree in a Lumbini forest. His mother Mahamaya gave birth to Siddhartha Gautama under the tree. And then we see that, I mean, also one more incident related to his life is the very first experience of meditation, which he had. I mean, that was also under a rose apple tree, a jumbo tree, where he had his first kind of encounter with the meditative trance. And then when he set out, I mean, he left home and was practicing. Of course, I mean, he chose for his last meditative journey. He chose this beautiful land of near the river Neranjara in Bodh Gaya. I mean, and it was and it was described. The Buddha described himself, describes it as a beautiful setup, a beautiful landscape. And under this the tree, Bodhi tree, the people tree, he got his enlightenment. And after that, also he spent several weeks near in the vicinity of that Bodhi tree and under several trees. I mean, he meditated under a Rajayatana tree, under a Ajapala tree, right? I mean, so basically there were all these different trees which were associated, and therefore, when he taught, when he gave his discourses, he always made references to trees, jungles, forests. I mean, and his imagery that he used was also very much related to plants, right? And then throughout, I mean, when he had his last journey, of course, he passed away in Kushinagar in the between the two shala trees. So I mean, it is quite interesting. And then the precepts, I mean, the initial precepts which were laid down, the monks were even, I mean, initially were supposed to spend their nights under a tree. So they should be staying under the tree and spend time in forest. And Buddha had experience. I mean, explained also various interesting incidences which took place in forest and so on. How he overcame fear in the forest and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the forest has been a very integral part of Buddha's own life, and not just Buddha, but I mean, as I said, since it was an ascetic religion prominently. I mean, several Buddhist practitioners experience the same. I mean, they always had this, and therefore, I mean, in Buddhism. Basically early Buddhism, the Bodhi tree, I mean, the tree of enlightenment is worshipped as representing the Buddha. And not just Gautama Buddha, but even the tradition believes that every Buddha, I mean, Gautama Buddha is not the only Buddha according to tradition. So we have several Buddhas, infinite number of Buddhas if you go to the Mahayana tradition. But even in the Theravada tradition, you accept several previous Buddhas. And it is believed that all Buddhas, they attain their knowledge under a tree, under a certain tree. So there is a whole list of enlightenment trees if you look at Buddhist scripture. So, I mean, tree and knowledge, tree and, I mean, this peace is something which is, I think, inseparable. I mean, and that's what you see in Buddhist literature. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. I think there's Sukratu raising hand. So you can just unmute and ask your question. Yeah.
Yeah, good evening. I'm your colleague from the university.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah, it was an enjoyable talk, sir. I have a brief question. You at the end of your talk, towards the end, you mentioned how nature is to be respected and taken care of by us, as though it were a part of ourselves. Now,
yes.
that feeling, yeah. So that we understand at the outset, we do understand that we are interdependent. We are all interdependent, and also upon nature. So we have to take care of the whole thing. So that is one level of understanding that we have. Now, is there a view that this kind of care for nature, the kind of empathy we might feel, comes out of some kind of a deep identity I mean, nature being a part of ourselves. Is this view there in Buddhist studies? I'm afraid I'm not an expert at this, but is this kind of a view also prevalent, where the nature is seen as a part of ourselves more than the empathy that we see?
Right,
Thank you, sir.
right. Yeah, thank you very much. No, I mean, of course, if you look at the Buddhist, I mean, deeper Buddhist philosophy, the Abhidhamma philosophy, what you see is that our own existence, I mean, our own body is basically made up of 5 elements, like earth, water, fire, and air. That is one thing. Second thing is that our mind, for example, our thoughts. I mean, our thoughts are, are not. I mean, how are they affected? I mean, you can see our thoughts are also dependent on the physiology. I mean, it's not just mental phenomena, but it is something which also comes uh, from uh, from the matter. It is dependent on matter. So it talks about the dependence of mind and matter, interdependence of mind and matter, and in terms of our body too. I mean, we talk about the body which is which is the result of your uh, karma, the body with which we are born. I mean, that's one body, but then that body is nourished with food, right? So that is another impact. So your body is affected by whatever nutrition you take. It is also affected by the climate, Ritu, and so on. So, I mean, there is this deep understanding, of course, which is embedded in Buddhist philosophy about the relationship between a being, I mean, as a human being, and this natural elements. That is there. I mean, and that has to be. That is at a very deeper level, you can say, and therefore, when one is disturbed, of course, the others will be disturbed. That kind of dependence is acknowledged. Otherwise, I mean, say, the empathy is one thing, of course, but this whole idea that you are one of the, I mean, one of the elements of the nature, and therefore you see, I mean, there's also this another important idea which you find especially in this Buddhist karmic theory, that whatever karma you do, or whatever, accordingly you will be born in different realms. Now that is an interesting thought, because you are born, you're a human being, but maybe in your next life you can be an animal, right? Or I mean, so our whatever animals are around you at today, I mean, that they might be your past mother or father, or your any of your relatives. I mean, who knows? Because I mean, one is not I mean, one is not a human being forever, one is not an animal forever. So this kind of interchangeability, I mean, according to your actions, you go to different realms. So that is again an interesting idea, because one has to kind of keep this in mind, that harming, even, I mean, hurting animals, or doing cruelty towards animals could even be kind of considered as cruelty to, I mean, to your parents, to your loved ones, who knows? So, I mean, these kind of ideas are there, which in a way uh, enforce this idea of the nature care there. But uh, uh, that's it. I mean, that's what, I mean, we can say at this moment.
I see. Sorry to press on further, but I mean, my question was still a bit further than that. I mean, is it that I mean, this is a public talk. I'm sorry, but I mean, just to make my question more precise, is there a thought like the physical environment which you see around is actually an extension of your own self, physical extension? I mean, it's a part of your own self, although we are in a sort of a state of ignorance that we are not able to appreciate it. Is this kind of a thought also present in the studies that you have carried out?
It is, I mean, such a thought, as I said, I mean, that you, I mean, you are not aware that you are a part of this whole, I mean, universe. I mean, it's not like you are something like the embodied consciousness, but the whole consciousness, there is the universal consciousness, you are embodied, I mean, conscious. That kind of idea is not there, of course.
Thank you.
But the idea of interdependence is there. I mean, so we talk about interdependence, but we do not say that, I mean, it is something like, as you said, that we are not aware that we are part of it. So the ignorance which I mentioned, therefore, is not ignorance that you're a part of a Brahman or something, but you are ignorant that you are basically causally connected and interdependent on this
Thank you.
whole universe. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Can I ask? Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir, for this insightful talk. My question is, as you have already elaborated in your talk, these main principles of Paticca the law of dependent origination, and which mainly, focuses on that the all phenomena arise in the dependence on other conditions. And when we see, which is not extended actually, is limited to the human being. If it extends to the natural world, and we are all being and elements such as plants, animal, air, water, these all things are interconnected.
Yes.
And you have given examples of the Jatakaji stories also, of course, which is connected to this animals relationship and their practices which Bodhisattvas performs. So humans are not actually, we see, the separate from this nature, but are deeply dependent on it. So my question is, you see, nowadays, actually, we are facing different kind of this environmental issues, climate changes, the globally. So what my, in my mind is comes this is then what role can Buddhist ethical principle play in addressing these global environmental issues, such as climate change, which you have already mentioned in your talk, and biodiversity's losses, and ecological degradation, because forestry is also is changing and
Okay.
it's completely destructed. So,
Okay.
sir,
Yes.
will you please highlight some
yes. I
more
mean,
fundamental
yeah.
principles for that?
Yes,
Yeah.
as I touched upon it in my talk, but I mean, one thing is, we have to, as a Buddhist practitioner, one has to understand, of course, first of all, this interdependence, which you also mentioned, and we have to take that universal responsibility. That's important, because one has to always keep that awareness that any small action of mine, I mean, what kind of detergent I decide to use, what kind of clothes I decide to wear, right? What kind of materials or how extravagant I live. I mean, how much resources I use. I mean, all these small questions which are related to your own life. I mean, if you try to see that with this very understanding of dependent coexistence, I mean, you will realize that you will change your way of living. I mean, so what is important is to change our way of living and to live with that understanding of interdependent co-arising. See, I mean, we are happy. We clean our houses through our garbage, but we don't even care what happens to that garbage, how it is kind of processed or not. I mean, we are just happy that our houses are clean. So, I mean, so all such small things. I mean, so we have to have that environmental awareness, and in order to take care of it. I mean, there could be different ways of doing this. I mean, as just now, I mean, we had this. Dr. Sukratu mentioned one thought would be that, okay, I'm just embodied. Embodied universe in a way. That could be one way of thinking.
Yeah.
Another way of thinking, as Buddhism provides, is like this dependent co-arising. So I'm one of the component of that whole machinery of the world, and every single act of mine is responsible for the world around me. So if I kind of develop that kind of attitude, and as I mentioned, also the practice of Brahma Vihara, which is basically aimed at the human beings. But if we can also apply that to the nature around us, I think then that could also help. So, I mean, one has to, there are some things which are already given, because one has to remember that at the time of Buddha, there were no environmental crises as such, which we are facing now. But now we are facing them. And what we have to do is, our responsibility is to take out principles from the teachings, and then to interpret them, to define them in a modern situation, and see how it can be helpful. I mean, just now I also mentioned to you about the craving. I mean, craving and ignorance as a root of suffering. I mean, that is what is said by the Buddha. Now, if you take that principle and apply it to the problems and the suffering caused by environmental crisis, I think we can look at the applied part of these principles in this way. So I think in this way, this is our responsibility now as a scholars and practitioners of Buddhism to take out wisdom from the traditional scriptures, and then to apply it to in the modern situations to make it more meaningful, to actually address our modern issues and difficulties. So that's a way. So, and what I've suggested is not the only one. I mean, I think when one can think, I mean, there are so many things. Just a practice of morality, and all these things can be related to the issue of environmental care and nature care. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for well elaboration. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would like to ask you a question, sir. You
Yes,
spoke about craving as one source. You see, very often we have this idea that Buddhism is against all craving. But
yes,
in your exposition, you seem to say that it's not against all desires. Some desires seem to be, if
right.
they're properly regulated, then they have a,
Yes,
because we have also some desires in our heart. Can you
yes.
clarify that a little more?
Yes, I mean, you see, what Buddhism says is that craving is a cause of suffering. And when you say craving, what I mean, the word itself is Trishna, right? I mean, which is used in the ancient scriptures. And Trishna is like the thirst. And this thirst is a kind of a symbolic representation. Like when you become obsessed with something, like I mean, as I always give example in my class, like it is like this: I mean, you watch some kind of advertisement of a Coke or a Pepsi, where people, I mean, they are so thirsty and they cannot really think of anybody, and they are so desperate to get that bottle and drink, so on and so forth. So basically, thirst is that kind of attitude. I mean, that kind of state of mind. So you have desire, but when desire, I mean, like even to become enlightened or to become to progress spiritually, you need to have a desire to do that. And in fact, not to have such a desire can be one of the obstacles. I mean, in fact, in Buddhism, it is said that if you are not really interested in your spiritual cultivation, then that is harmful. I mean, that is not a good thing. So desires, I mean, all desires are not bad, but when desires turn into obsessions, right? When they become obsessions, when you're obsessed with them, and when you're mentally, in a way, you can say, possessed by those desires, then that causes suffering, because then you lose your understanding, you lose your empathy for others, right? You lose, I mean, you just think about your own self. You become very selfish, self-centered. So that's the attitude. So therefore, the Buddha said that, having desires is, I mean, you need to have desire. Otherwise, we won't do anything in the world, right? I mean, for every act, we need to have some wish to do things. So without that, a human being will not act. So we need to have wishes. But those wishes, I mean, and it is very interesting, Father, that there is a story of Buddha's close disciple Ananda. I mean, after Buddha's passing away, there was a meeting to collect all his teachings, and the condition for that meeting was that everyone participating in that meeting should be an arhat, should be a realized being. And Ananda by that time did not reach that state. Now it is said that there was a meeting next day, and Ananda was so desperate to become enlightened that very night. I mean, so I mean, and he strived and strived. He was meditating. He was walking up and down, meditating, and but he could not reach that state of deliverance. And finally, at the morning, he thought that, okay, now it's okay. I tried my best, but it is not possible. And he left that obsession, I mean, that even for enlightenment. And then he went to to rest. And they say that the moment he reached, and then he lift his feet from the ground, and before touching his head touched the pillow, he became enlightened. Now, this is a wonderful story. It tells you that even a desire, I mean, even an obsession for liberation, right? That could also be an obstacle. So, I mean, all in all, what Buddhism is trying to say is that I mean, desires, if and if they do not really burn you in the sense of they do not make you vulnerable because of obsession, they're okay. I mean, but when it becomes obsessive and when it becomes something which comes in your way, in way of your spiritual progress, then that is a harmful thing. And as I said, I mean, in terms of like otherwise, it is if you say that there are no desires at all, then I think there won't be any difference between a human being and a stone. I mean, so to have desires for good things, moderate way, without obsession, that is okay. So that's a Buddhist view. So what Buddha condemns is Trishna, the craving, and not simple desire as such.
Thank you, sir, for that. A person called Silla has put up their hand. Please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I have the small question about regarding to the nature in the Buddhist perspective. So I think it's the water also regarding a lot of in the Buddhist literature, and then nowadays is the water, especially the drinking water, is a big problem in not only in India but in the whole world. So,
Yes.
do you have any suggestion about that? Yes.
Now, you see about the water, the cleanliness of water. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier. I mean, in that question answer session, that or even in the Vinaya. I mean, if you just look at the Vinaya rules, Buddha was very careful about the use of water. He was very careful about the consumption of water. It is quite interesting that he was also very much careful about the hygiene, the water and hygiene. So he asked his the monks and nuns to use strainers. He gave guidelines about how to keep the water clean, not to how to save it from contamination. And he makes a very clear distinction between the water, drinking water, and the usable water, which we talk about these days, that we should not use drinking water for purposes of cleaning our vehicles and so on and so forth. So, but I mean, in the Buddhist text, we see a very clear distinction between paniya, which is a drinking water, and paribhojaniya, which is a water for use. So, I mean, we see this very clear, idea about it. And then, as I said, in terms of how to deal with the water resources, now we have a special, instructions for that. And there, as I said, not to urinate, not to defecate in water, not to throw food in the water. So, I mean, these are the instructions given. Now, of course, if we use this, kind of take this as a template for modern times, we have to understand that we cannot pollute the sources of water, right? We cannot pollute. We should not pollute. If you pollute the sources of water, it is ultimately it is going to come back to us, and we are going to harm ourselves through that. So because as I said, now all the modern crises with the water pollution were not there at that time so much, but still, you can see from these small instructions which Buddha gave to monks and nuns, that he wanted them to keep the sources of water clean, right? So so some of these things which we find in the text, I think is quite important for our day-to-day practice. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Sir.
John?
Sir, I have one
Yes.
question.
Yes, may I know who is speaking?
This is Vivek Mitra.
Oh, Vivek Mitra. Okay, yeah, please.
So thank you very much, sir. Very good talk. It's in the relevance of these days about the environment awareness and the things like that going happen. So my question is that, sir, you mentioned in your talk that human life is very precious. And how can we relate with the six realms and where we can see ourselves in that? Or that is in the, we say the mirror of that, we can see ourselves into in.
I mean, you see, I mean, there will be now. This is a bit maybe out of the present topic of the talk, but I mean, I'll just kind of what I mentioned in my talk is that in Buddhism, in Buddhist cosmology, we talk about different lokas, different realms, right? And there it is, I mean, that specifically the division in different realms is made on the basis of level of consciousness. So in that scale, as we see that even though, I mean, we can see that, okay, animals and human beings, they live in the same physical world, but at the level of their consciousness, they are in different realms, right? So we have dogs and cats around us, but at the level of consciousness, which humans have and which animals have, there is a marked distinction made by the Buddha or in Buddhism. So there, what we can see, that even though we are in the same world, I mean, on the same earth, but at the level of consciousness, I mean, when you say human life is precious, what you actually meant is like, okay, human consciousness is superior as compared to the animal consciousness. Now that is one kind of view which we find in Buddhism. So basically, these realms they could be understood from that point of view, from the point of view of level of our consciousness, right? So that is one thing. And the other thing is like this is also done on the basis of, I mean, it's also connected with the level of consciousness, that the capacity or ability to make spiritual progress. And it is again believed now in this sense. I mean, it is said that humans are of course superior to the other like the ghosts and the demons and animals, but I mean, they are even considered superior to the gods, because the gods, I mean, though because they have long life, they are in a very luxurious or the very happy, pleasant life, they don't experience suffering, so they don't have that urge to liberate. So, and for that point of view, even though they are at the level of consciousness, even though they are superior to human beings, but from the point of view of their ability and chances of spiritual progress, I think it is said that human consciousness is far more well placed from that sense. In that sense, yeah, yeah. So that's what I can say in the connection of this talk.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
One more question, sir. Is very basic questions.
Yeah.
Is comes in many time in the general life. So, what extent we can take this first precept, not killing, look to having meat, eating meat, or for the particularly for the Buddhist
Ah.
practitioner,
Yeah. Now
monk,
that's
monk,
yeah.
yeah, monks also given so
Yes.
many
That's a
answers. They
very
say Buddha didn't mention this, and so many things involved.
no, I mean, I mean, I touched it a bit in my
Yeah.
talk, that and the distinction actually, you know, that Dr. Ambedkar has also made, that is will to kill and need to kill. So that is one thing. I mean, that could be one way of looking at it. The second thing is that in Buddhism, of course, we talk about abstinence from killing as a principle, right? But that principle, I mean, you have to observe as a layperson as best as you can, right? But at the same time, Buddha is also aware of some other principles. For example, now you know that in the Theravada tradition, I mean, monks and nuns are not really forbidden from eating meat, and that is the main reason was because Buddhism as a monastic religion initially was dependent on alms food. I mean, the members were supposed to go house to house and and beg for their food, right? Now, when you're doing this, you cannot have your own choices, and I mean, it shows. I mean, especially the Buddhist texts clearly show that prominently the society was a meat-eating society. Now, in such a society, you cannot really go and say that no, I mean I'm a vegetarian. I do not take this kind of food. So, the only rule which is made in the Vinaya is that you should make sure that the meat is not specially cooked for you. If meat is specially cooked for you, or when you doubt it, you heard it from somewhere, then you should not accept it. So that's a restriction, right? So you should not eat meat. I mean, the Buddha in one of the sutta, I mean, he has mentioned that this meat eating is not for enjoyment, right? But I mean, and the Buddha said that while eating meat, also you have to kind of keep the consciousness as if you are eating the meat of your own son in a desert, just in order to survive. So, I mean, the attitude towards food is like you take food for your survival, for the maintenance of your body, not for enjoyment, not for any other purpose. So, I mean, you don't eat meat because you like it. And not just to also to build your muscles or something. I mean, that kind of thing is prohibited. But later in Buddhist tradition, I mean, in the Mahayana tradition or in the texts like Lankavatara, I mean, you see instructions of strict vegetarianism. And they say that as a Buddhist, you should not eat, I mean, you should not have any meat eating is prohibited. Any sort of violence is prohibited. And because the cornerstone of Buddhism is, of course, wisdom and compassion. And as a compassion as a principle, so if you have compassion as a principle, then you are not supposed to take any life. So I mean, you have this kind of developments in the tradition, and I think that is possible when the religion then settles as a monastic religion, where you kind of cook food and you have choices to like you can make a choice like what kind of food to eat. Then of course the principle is to follow compassion. But if you're living on alms food, then the Buddha is very practical. He said that don't make it very complicated. Just take whatever is given, and just eat with that kind of mental attitude as if you are eating the meat of your own child, right? So that means without attachment, without any obsession for that food, right? So with that kind of mindset, detached mindset, one should consume food. That's his message. So I mean, that's very practical and pragmatic, I mean, in that sense. And I already mentioned to you, if you have no will to kill, just accidentally, if there are insects being killed under your feet, then that will not amount to killing, because every act becomes a karmic act only when it is backed up by your volitions. Yeah, so that's what I
Thank you
can
so
say.
much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, sir, for this very enlightening exposition, which helped us to see the relevance of Buddhist traditions in today's world. I think that is a very good thing you have done for all of us. Since
Thank
it's
you,
about
Father.
time up, we'll unwind. Thank you very much. And I thank all the participants also who took an active part asking questions, etc.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Father. Thank you very much.
The next program will be on the
Father, there is I think one or two
one more question.
requests. Yeah, it seems.
But please keep it short. It's already time up.
Yeah.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Nagesh Savle. Good evening, sir. Just
Good
the
evening.
question was in Buddhist philosophy, there is in Jatak Katha, it is shown that there is a rebirth of
Yes.
the Buddha himself, whereas there is another school of thought that since there is no Atma and there is no rebirth. So can you please throw some light how exactly it is?
Yeah, actually, this is a bit outside our topic for today. But I mean, in short, I mean, traditional Buddhism will say that yes, I mean, in Milinda Panya, I mean, it is explained how one can explain rebirth without a soul, without Atman. And then the idea is that of continuity, a series. So as one, I mean, they explain it with the analogy of like a stream of river, or with a burning flame. I mean, the flame burns throughout the night, but every moment there is a new flame, and this one flames, when it dies out, it gives rise to another next flame, and then that one to the next flame. And in this way, I mean, there is a continuity of conscious moments without self. I mean, and that continuity is maintained due to other causes and conditions. So in this way, I mean, in traditional Buddhism, this rebirth is explained, and they also explain it in the same way when we talk about rebirth, right? But of course, that I mean, there are other schools of in Buddhism which deny the rebirth totally. I mean, that will be another. So in Buddhism, we have lots of, I mean, there's a whole spectrum of ideas. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. This is what I can say in short. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, Dr. Deokar, for your exposition.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Very enriching. Also want to
Thank you
thank,
very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank also all the participants
Yes.
and, you know, the active role you all took in the session today. In fact, we have gone beyond our time for the first time. I also want to
Thanks a
thank
lot.
the management of both our institutions, St. Vincent College, as well as S.I.S.R. And of course, Gilby sir, who's always been part of our program. So thank you. The next talk will be the Sikh perspective. That is on the 12th, the second Saturday in October. Okay. So hope to see you all there. Good night and God bless.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.